In examining countries around the world, it is apparent that there are many difficulties to creating successful economies of both large and small scale. Successful economies throughout the world are not only bolstered by strong monetary policy. They find a great deal of their success largely due to the attitude and action of the government and the citizens participating in economic activities. Many economies in the African and Middle Eastern regions have fallen behind that of the traditional world superpowers, yet there has also been economic success enjoyed in this region. The scope of this project is to analyze why some economies have flourished in this era, while others have substantially fallen behind the rest of the world. The first objective of this project is to gather and interpret the data presented on the list countries in order to draw inference and conclusions into why and how these countries could improve their economies. Strong performing economies in this region were also analyzed in order to provide a better look into how a country can achieve economic success. This information will be compared to that of the poor economic performers in order to examine the key differences contributing to the gap in economic performance. This is the secondary objective of the analysis in order to provide helpful insight into why and how poor economic condition and performance exist, and how a country can go about attempting to correct a poor or slowly developing economy. It is in the achievement of these objectives that we hope to provide a template of the economic success for emerging and unsuccessful economies in this area of the world. Also, the second part.
Go.
So examining our selected regions, it's clear that there's some great examples of economic success as well as some unsuccessful countries that can be improved upon by identifying the key factors limiting their progress. So onto our strong economies. Qatar is one of the world's largest oil producers. They've got the highest GDP in the world of over $100,000 and the lowest unemployment rate in the world also. They have the least corrupt country in this area as well. Very high internet usage and high education rate. Overall, Israel is a great economy, shows good strength and resilience, low unemployment rate, and great growth rate of 3.3%. What limits Israel is the struggle with Palestine, however. For overall success of the Israeli economy, there needs to be peace between Israel and Palestine. On to Jordan, which has traditionally been a strong economy for the region. It's relatively peaceful, considering the amount of turmoil in this region, but it can't completely isolate itself from the rest of the countries in the region. And lately, due to the influx of refugees from Syria, it's been taking an economic hit. That'll bring us to some of our struggling economies. Malta has both political and economic struggles. Its membership in the European Union is good for its many trade goods. It doesn't have to worry about tariffs or import-export costs because of the European Union. It's got low corruption rates, high innovation rates, and it's got one of the highest infrastructure rates when measuring in internet users with 70% access. Next is Oman, which is traditionally reliant on oil reserves, that they're trying to move on to other industries since the oil reserves have been declining. It hasn't really been working for them yet, so they're so heavily reliant on oil. Iraq has great natural resources, and it's another country that's highly dependent on oil. Unfortunately, with all the turmoil, the war, it's been very rough for the country's economy. They're almost completely reliant on oil. They have a very low GDP per capita, under $10,000, and very low internet usage and very low education rate. Kuwait is a very good economic country for this region, but the country is almost completely dependent on oil. Very, very little diversification. Their economy is completely revolving around oil, and their attempts to diversify have completely fallen short. Estimates indicate that Kuwait's economy will remain dependent on oil for at least another 30 years. And then another country which is completely dependent on oil is Libya. They have met some success with their attempts to diversify by establishing petrochemical plants. So they're getting closer to being less dependent on oil. There's a few more countries. The Algerian economy is also very rich in natural gas and oil resources. They've got very little debt, but they also have very low GDP. Bahrain is also heavily rich in oil and natural resources, and it's also very dependent on them. It's got a high internet usage rate, and again, almost completely dependent on oil, so they still need to diversify.
There are two main reasons why countries have weak performing economies in this region. The first main reason is that countries have a lack of natural resources compared to some of the others. With countries heavily rich in oil reserves and other natural resources such as natural gas, it is extremely hard for those that do not have these reserves to compete with them. Morocco is dependent on its location and large workforce for its economic activity. Despite this, it doesn't have any natural resources and therefore a low per capita GDP. Kiribati is a remote chain of islands that have very little to no natural resources, and they depend on the UN and other foreign aid for a lot of their help and contribution to their population's ability to sustain themselves. They have a very low GDP rate as a result of this because they don't have many developing industries. Djibouti also has little to no natural resources, and because of this it has unemployment rates as high as 60%. The economy is bolstered also through foreign aid, and they don't have really much information or technological workforces. The infrastructure of the economy is also very low, so we can determine that these countries are substantially falling behind other countries when comparing them to those that do not have and have natural resources. The other area that makes economies weak in this region is excessive corruption. Egypt is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and it has poor economic conditions as well as civil unrest because of this. The per capita GDP is only $6,600 US, and the government policy in this country seems to mean that they will not be moving forward in terms of innovation in the future. Iran is also a very corrupt country, and it ranks amongst the highest in the world when measuring the corruption rating. The economy is heavily dependent on their oil reserves, though, so they have been able to support a relatively better GDP. Yet, the corruption in this country has substantially hindered economic progress. In conclusion, countries such as Kiribati don't really have a chance to compete with large countries such as Qatar. It can be shown from the data that foreign aid exists to countries in necessity of such, yet the foreign aid is not helping them control and implement their own successful economies. Morocco and Iraq are examples of this. Another conclusion is that war and political instability can severely limit economic progress. Countries rich in economic reserves such as Algeria and Iran are a testament to this. Furthermore, these same countries have low levels of infrastructure, showing that a weak commitment to overall well-being of the citizens and property has disadvantages. In conclusion, we believe these ideas can be used as a template for weaker performing economies in order to have strong economic outlook in the future.